All right. Next question. You touched on alternative energy, Senator. There is a huge amount of pressure right now on the Environmental Protection Agency to at least partially, if not fully, waive the renewable fuel standard, which is really a mandate to use certain levels of corn-based ethanol. Are you in favor of that? Is it a bad idea? And I'll ask that question to both of you.
Well, I've just stated that, starting out, obviously in regards to the ethanol industry, there had to be something done to at least entice a lot of investment. I would prefer we wouldn't do it with mandates, but that's, what happened. And I think, basically, both Senator Moran and I, Jerry Moran, we answered this question down when Cuyahoga was having their convention in Wichita. And whatever we do, it seems to me that you don't get into jerking rugs out from underneath people. And I think if you could phase in or phase out whatever we're talking about here, I know I really don't like to see one segment of agriculture pit against another. And I know the cowboys are going through a terrible time right now, the livestock producers, and I know that should not be, we shouldn't be the Hatfields and McCoys here, debating this issue. But I think that's probably where it is. And whatever we do, it seems to me that over probably a 2-year period would be the best answer to address that. So I think that the administration kicked that can down the road here with the EPA with a request, and I just don't think there's any way that the EPA is going to grant that, and I don't see legislation forcing that issue either. Dan?
Well, the Secretary of Vilsack is strongly opposed to waiving the restrictions, so my guess is he's not going to be way out front, and the administration is going to actively go the other direction. I mean, he's a big ethanol and biofuel supporter. I would say this: 40% of the corn we grow in this country is for the fuel markets now. And so we've had an expansion of corn production, but just think about that. 30 years ago, none of it was grown for fuel. Now 40% is grown for fuel. That's a lot of corn that's grown to put in our cars. And the good part about that is that it's helped restore price to all the commodities, wheat, corn, and soybeans. And it's a big factor in why our farm economy, again, notwithstanding the drought, I recognize that, it's a big factor why we've had a stronger farm economy overall, I think, is the biofuels markets. I think at some point we need to phase down and maybe phase out the requirement for the standard. You don't need it forever if the markets are healthy and the industry is doing well. It's very hard to get rid of a subsidy, however, once you got it in there. So I don't know when it would happen, but, at some point we don't need it any longer.
Okay. Let's turn back the clock for a moment to the time you were both members.
Partisan agreement in the Senate, albeit 4 of my colleagues voted no, but I think that was basically folks who represent the southern producers. But, this is something that people talk about or suggest to me all the time and say, gee, we just don't understand how you can, work back there. The well is poisoned. It's been terribly partisan. It's the worst time in the history of the Congress. I just don't buy that. I remember, and Dan, you'll remember this as well, I remember during the Vietnam War, hey, LBJ, how many babies did you kill today? I mean, that's pretty tough. I remember my predecessor receiving a death certificate with his 2 sons' names on it, for goodness sakes, and that was from his Methodist minister. And I thought, what's going on here? I mean, it was just an incredible thing, and it got very partisan, and it, although on both sides in regards to those days. I remember Watergate. Watergate was a terribly difficult time that we went through. And you keep on going. I mean, you can just, talk about the situation where there was an impeachment process for President Clinton. And I can give you other examples as we've come through history. And I think we forget just how tough it was, and we focus on what the issue is today. We have a very polarized country, but and a Congress that reflects that diversity. And we're all, bookshelved apparently by everybody who says we have to be here or there in the right field bleachers or the right field or center field or left field or whatever. Very difficult to get to the middle when you have, quite frankly, an administration that has moved, in my view, significantly away from what previous administrations have had, including that of Bill Clinton. And then the reaction to that, of course, has been on the other side, and you can understand why this has happened. So I don't buy it that this is the worst of times. I still remain optimistic. I'll look at it this way. The farmer never put the seed in the ground if he didn't think he's going to have a crop. Now, we're going to put the seed in the ground in a couple of weeks here. I hope we can put the seed in the ground and something will happen. And I hope we get moisture, too. So with that admonition, I don't think this is the worst of times.
Well, it was Mark Twain who said 100 years ago, there's only one true criminal class in America, and that criminal class is Congress. And that was in 1913. So I guess it's to say the same reaction has been for a long time. I agree with everything Pat said, except I'd add two other things. Number one is that we're in a period of a frenetic chase for money, campaign money. Just to give you some idea, I ran for Congress in 1976 and defeated an incumbent congressman and spent $100,000 total in that race. Today, that race would probably cost $5 million minimum. What does that mean? That means is that all people can do is join the race for money. Both sides do this. And let me tell you, if all you're doing is raising money, that means you're doing a lot of less of meeting with your colleagues and talking and listening and trying to work on issues. That's a real problem. The second thing is the nature of the media, not Kelly, but we have 24-hour media. You watch what you want. If you're liberal, you watch MSNBC. If you're conservative, you watch Fox. Nobody watches the same thing anymore. I mean, 100 years ago when I was growing up, you had three national stations. You watched Walter Cronkite or Huntley Brinkley, or I forgot who else was on, who? Frank Reynolds or Peter Jennings, and that was kind of it. Now, I'm not yearning for those good old days again. I like to be able to flip through all the channels. But what's happening is people are listening primarily to messages that reinforce their own views and not listening to a variety of messages out there and where they can kind of think a little bit for themselves. And so I'm not going to say that's the only problem. I'm just saying that reinforces all of this as well. And then there's a lot of yelling and screaming and polarizing on TV, which I think makes, and talk radio, which maybe gives people the impression that things are worse than it is. I will have to tell you that I run a program at the Aspen Institute, and Pat came to one of our conferences with a Congressman, George Miller, who is about a pretty liberal member of Congress. And he was one of the authors of the No Child Left Behind law with John Boehner, the current speaker. But he and Pat got together and worked on educational proposals. And if you had seen them in that room, you would think, this place is on the level, and they know what they're doing, and they're working these things out. And I'm not saying this to be overly patronizing, but if we had a few more Pat Roberts in the place, I think things would work out a lot better than we do now.